My name's Radley Horton, and along with the other instructor for the course, Joyce Klein-Rosenthal, I want to welcome all of you to an event that we're really excited about today, the undergraduate capstone final presentations in sustainable development. So you're going to hear today 4 fantastic presentations summarizing the work of the seniors in this program. I think everybody in the room knows the program well. Just to sort of quickly talk about the purpose of this class. It really is, in a sense, a capstone, as the title implies. It's, as we've talked about it in prior years, for many students, it's intended to be sort of their first experience working with a client on a consulting type of project focused on issues related to sustainable development. And more over the years, given the diversity of all the things so many of you have worked on, by the time you get to be seniors, you've already had a lot of capstone type experiences working with clients, either during your undergraduate years or at other points. So I think, you know, it's just part of a portfolio of experiences that are becoming more and more important, just as sustainable development is becoming more and more important around our world, the sort of interface of what you do academically with the applied world, which I know is so important to all of you. So in terms of the logistics for today, as I say, we'll have 4 presentations. We have a block of 15 minutes for each of the presentations, but we're holding each of the 4 groups to 10 minutes of presenting. If you run a minute long, we'll start to get very antsy. If you get to 12 minutes, we're really going to be ringing the bell. Seriously, because there's only then 3 minutes or so for questions, and I know in the audience, there are a lot of questions people want to raise. So please don't run over 10 minutes or 11 minutes tops. After we have those presentations, we'll have a little bit of mingling, time for discussion. As everybody knows, we have snacks in the back. Also, critically, we have the chance to look in depth at these fantastic posters as part of the research methods class of LISA's. So really looking forward to the chance for everyone to spend time conversing after these presentations. Okay, before jumping into the program matter, Joyce and I want to take a little time to say thanks to the folks that make this possible. So to first mention our TAs, Mercedes and Soha, thanks for all that you've done this semester to support these students and make the class a success. Special thanks to the program managers, Carrie and Natalie, also to other folks across EI, event staff. I saw Pamela outside, sound support in the back, thank you, and others for all you've been doing. And to highlight especially the leadership, the intellectual support, the passion from Ruth and Jason making this program what it is. So thank you for all your support too. Okay, so with that, as I invite up the first group who's going to be presenting the strategic assistance for Archive Global, if you could make your way up here. So please, great. Please speak into the mic. When we get to the questions phase, we'll be passing around microphones to the audience. Please use them, and again, as you answer, please use the mic as well. A little worried about that falling. You might want to advance that. I think there's a clicker too.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Radley. Good morning, everyone. And I speak on behalf of my whole team when I say this project is extremely close to our hearts, and so it is a privilege for me to be able to share it with all of you. This semester, we've been working with Archive Global, which is an international NGO committed to architecture for health initiatives, mainly in Asia and Africa. We partnered with them on 2 of their projects, one which is a flooring upgrade project in Bangladesh and a sanitation project in Cameroon. While the nature of the 2 projects differ, we were united in our approach. Our guiding principle was to make sure that the projects are as rooted in the background and context-specific as possible. So we adopted a 4-part approach where we first immersed ourselves into understanding the community that we were working with, followed by carrying out an impact assessment and risk evaluation, findings from which then shaped our strategic recommendations for Archive and their local partners. First, for the Bangladesh project. So one of Archive's flagship projects is their mud to mortar project, which involves upgrading mud floorings in rural houses to concrete floors. While the project has been well received for its health impacts, the cost of the flooring upgrade has been a challenge. So we were tasked with conducting a feasibility analysis to see if microcredit is a viable option to finance these flooring upgrades in Savar district. So Savar district is a peri-urban area near Dhaka in Bangladesh, with 72% of the population living below the poverty line and a quarter of them relying on agriculture as their main source of income. As many of you know, the financial landscape in Bangladesh is rapidly evolving owing to their economic development mostly. Today, over 47% of the population is financially included, and 23% of that is due to non-bank financial institutions, most importantly, microcredit institutions such as the Grameen Bank. This is particularly important for groups, the financial inclusion of groups such as women and informal workers, which tend to be traditionally underserved by formal banking institutions. So while there's no microcredit program that exists specifically for flooring upgrades, we did a literature review of numerous case studies of comparable microcredit programs from around the world, mainly sub-Saharan Africa, particularly for housing improvements. And we were able to identify some key impacts that we would expect for such a program for Archive. So among the financial outcomes, we found positive correlations with level of financial inclusion, level of household and business income. And for the non-financial outcomes, we expected positive health and nutrition benefits, primary education, and gender equality as well. Interestingly, we found that there are certain factors, such as having a relatively small loan size and repayment size, or having the lender be a woman, for instance, which drastically increase the likelihood of achieving these non-financial outcomes. Based on our findings from the case studies, the shared challenges that we observed, and adjusting them for our understanding of the Savar community in particular, we found 7 key implementation challenges that shaped our recommendations. These include over-indebtedness, which increased the risk of default, disproportionately large loan size and loan repayment duration, non-income generating loans, exclusion of marginalized groups, a high-risk target market, high administrative costs, and a reliance on unstable external fundings. Based on our findings, we then developed 2 original models for Archive and their local partner. The first of which is the differential credit model, which involves giving loans at different combinations of interest rates and repayment periods based on the applicant's profile, by which we mean their income and risk factor, which Archive would categorize based on a guiding criteria that we established for them. So to give you a quick example, going back to Mrs. Sarkar from an earlier slide, she is a mango farmer. She's a seasonal worker. So if she were to apply for a loan, she would first have to submit her income and other documents. Archive would then assess her income level and risk factor and categorize her into one of the 9 profile categories. So for example, because she's a seasonal worker and she's low paid, she would be in the low income, high risk category. Now, each of these profiles correspond to one of the 4 credit packages. So low income, high risk corresponds to the high interest rate, long repayment period, where the high interest rate, it corresponds to the high risk factor, and the long repayment period complements the low income so that she can comfortably repay her loan without having large monthly installations. And the second of the 2 models is the incremental credit model, where the cost of the flooring upgrade would be broken down into smaller packages, and the client can then take small successive loans to repay each of these packages. So for example, Mrs. Savar could first take a loan to pay off the cost of bricks. Once she repays that, she can take another loan to pay off the cost of concrete and other construction materials, and then finally take a loan to pay off the labor costs, which is about 50% of the total cost. I'll now hand over to Adelaide.
Great. So the second half of the Archive Global Workshop team worked with Archive in thinking through the first phase of their sanitation building project in Idenau, Cameroon. Idenau is a rural town in a larger municipality also called Idenau. It's on the western coast of Cameroon. It is a part of the English-speaking region in Cameroon, which has some cultural tensions at the national level. But the feature of Idenau that we most focused on is the fact that Idenau doesn't have any sanitation or water infrastructure. And as a result, the population practices open defecation predominantly, approximately 70% of the population. And Archive's needs assessment of Idenau determined three core challenges. The first is a lack of healthy hygiene behaviors. The second is waste management. And the third is a lack of, what am I forgetting? And the third is a lack of access to consistent, clean drinking water. Oh. And so all of these challenges are associated with the practice of open defecation. And so our study focused on targeting that challenge. And so we turned to CLTS, or Community-Led Total Sanitation. Community-Led Total Sanitation is a community-based approach to improve sanitation and hygiene at the community level. Its benefit is that it triggers long-term behavioral change, and as a result, it is the most widely applied method for ending open defecation at the community level in developing regions. Community-led total sanitation involves three core stages. The first is the pre-triggering stage, which is the planning stage. The triggering stage is the stage where behavioral change is enacted, and that involves several activities to inspire the community to want to stop open defecation. And finally, the post-triggering phase is kind of the planning stage for the community itself, taking steps to identify ways to end open defecation, one of which is latrine building. In order to understand what optimal CLTS implementation would look like in Idenau, we analyzed and evaluated case studies, and we identified 5 core characteristics to CLTS implementation. These included cost, education and training, time requirement, community, population, and demographic data, and collaboration and partners. And then we pulled out what we believe to be best practices overall and specific to Idenau. So with population, ideal communities are small. Partnerships are integral to the implementation of CLTS, and this might involve partnering with NGOs or regional government partners. In terms of education and training, this is critical prior to CLTS and throughout. And we found that CLTS projects that empowered natural leaders, which includes existing local leaders, women, and children in the process, were more effective. In terms of budgeting, the cost of CLTS is rather low in comparison to other sanitation interventions. However, it's extremely difficult to pinpoint the exact cost or the average cost of CLTS given how context-specific it is. So we recommend, in terms of budgeting, to take a bottom-up approach so that CLTS facilitators keep their impact, their community impact, at the forefront of their planning. And finally, as I mentioned, CLTS has 3 core stages. The first 2 are rather formulaic, and the last one is pretty variable. The post-triggering stage can be 3 weeks to 3 months, and so we delve into kind of what that might look like for Idenau. In order for CLTS to have a lasting impact for the community, to have a long-term open defecation-free status, CLTS must be coupled with some infrastructure. The post-triggering stage typically involves some latrine building with local materials, but more and more communities are wishing to have more durable technology that can be sustained. And that's where a sanitation service chain comes in. How do you manage the waste disposal, the capture, emptying, transport, treatment, and reuse or disposal of these materials? That includes the waste itself, but also the materials. And so we started to think about, okay, what would latrines look like, and how could we advise on what latrines should be constructed in order to make them sustainable and conducive to the community. And so we came up with a qualitative cost-benefit analysis of the different opportunities here. Idenau could opt for communal or private latrines, or they could also source locally in terms of the materials and designs, or they could import some more durable materials and perhaps consult other stakeholders for the latrine type. And these are some kind of costs and benefits associated with each of them. It really depends. The case studies we examined were very varied in terms of the decisions that facilitators made, and it will be an interesting discussion with our client this coming week to decipher what will make the most sense for them and Idenau. Finally, we'd like to thank our mentors and our amazing client for this opportunity. It's really such a privilege to have the opportunity to problem solve these exigent and seemingly intractable challenges at Columbia University, and we're really appreciative for all of you.
Making its way around, so have at it.
So this is great. I can appreciate that a dirt floor is not as good as a cement floor. But I'm just curious if there are other sustainability benefits to having cement flooring, things like improved family health. There are other factors behind that particular project that you see as important with regard to sustainability.
Right, absolutely. And this is a project that Archive has been working on, and they shared their research findings with us, in which there were positive correlations with health, most importantly, but also with education, because like when families have to spend less on healthcare, they can then invest that into their enterprise or into education. What I found was very interesting was that there are significant correlations to mental health, particularly of women who tend to stay at home more, of having a concrete floor versus a mud floor. But in this project, they wanted us to focus on the benefits of microcredit itself, since they had done significant research on the benefits of the mud floor versus concrete floor on its own.
Thank you.